Married, divorced, and single here, it's one family that mingles here.
Conservative and liberal here, we've all got to give a little here.
Big and small here, there's room for us all here.
Doubt and belief here, we all can receive here.
LGBTQ and straight here, there is no hate here.
Woman and man here, everyone can here.
Whatever your race here, for all of us grace here.
In imitation of the ridiculous love Almighty God has for each of us and all of us, let us live in love without labels.
I have a house full of movers. Eric is a busybody. He functions best when there's a project and an opportunity to create something out of nothing. Claire, she is constantly on the go as well, hanging with friends, going to the rock climbing gym, hiking, walking the dog. Andrew, he moves on his bike. When you come over for the next community dinner, just check out the bike park I have in my backyard. Peter and Titan Clark, Olin Young, among others, have helped Eric and Andrew build some hefty jumps for our dirt jumping kids. And I function best when I get regular movement. While I don't seem to need as much as the others, I definitely know when I need to get out. 2 to 3 times a week I'll run or walk. 2 to 3 times a week I lift weights. This keeps me at baseline. But there are other times when movement is absolutely required for me to function. When there's a pressing issue, when there's a grief, or there are confusing things that rattle around in my brain and have nowhere else to go. And this week, we are looking at the journey of 2 other movers, 2 followers of Jesus on the road to Emmaus. It's Sunday. Jesus died on Friday, and now there is some unsettling news creeping about. The women, they went to anoint Jesus' body after the Sabbath, but when they got there, the stone was rolled away from the tomb, and there was an angel proclaiming that Jesus wasn't there, that he had risen, whatever that meant. This news didn't garner the enthusiasm that we assume when we celebrate the Easter holiday. We shout in church, "He is risen! He is risen indeed!" But this was not the response. In fact, the women were speechless. They were sad and stuck. This was not good news. They needed his body. They didn't care if he was dead. They just needed his body. The women went and told the men what was reported to them by the angel. Peter and John immediately ripped out of there and discovered the same thing. Jesus' body was no longer in the tomb. Across the Gospels, we read the circulating reports of Jesus sightings by Mary Magdalene and Peter on that Sunday. There's a buzz in the air, and there's a whole lot of doubt and confusion. And then we read the story of the 2 travelers on the road to Emmaus. They too have an encounter with the risen Christ, which is where we will pick it up right now. Luke chapter 24, beginning with verse 13. Now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you only a visitor to Jerusalem and do not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women, well, they amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but him they did not see. I used to run a lot by myself. It was a chance to get away from the little ones, to have time to myself, to think and recover from the demands of potty training and sibling rivalries and unmet personal parenting expectations and all the things that come from having young children. When I could get out, it was like an escape. I would flee, taking advantage of the 30 to 45 minutes to reset my mind and body. And I always returned lighter and grateful for the break. I imagine this is how Cleopas and his companion felt. The events of the past couple days and the previous week were weighing so heavy. They didn't know which end was up. The pain of loss, the confusion of the morning's news, all of it demanded movement. It was the only way to process these events. My favorite local trail is Hall Ranch. When things are pressing and I can't make sense of what I'm feeling, I will go hike there. When Charlottesville happened, I knew I had to get out that morning to process, to grieve, to pray. And so I went. I started at the Nighthawk side, which is the hiking-only trail, and I wound my way up to the top. And there's something special about it up there at the top. The grass, the views, the breeze, the wide open expanse. I stop, breathe, take it in. I have to work it out in my body. I suspect Cleopas had a similar need. Maybe he alerted his wife and kids, you guys, I gotta get out of here. I need to take a long walk. I think I'm just gonna head to Emmaus. I'll grab some food there and I'll come back when I can, but don't save dinner for me. And I'm sure his wife and kids were like, yes, go, please, get out of here, like they are in my house. I like Hall Ranch because I have a clear destination. I can spend my energy on working out the things, not on navigation. I don't have to make any major decisions. It's freeing and it's important. Over the course of 9 miles, generally I'll feel much better. The problems don't go away, which certainly was the case for Charlottesville, but I'm able to return home with a clearer sense of what's next. I can return home with a glimmer of peace. The pressure cooker of grief and loss resulting from Jesus' death was already great. And now the reports of his body not being in the tomb, well, that's just plain confusing. How is one supposed to feel in this moment? There is no right way to feel. So these two travelers, they moved their bodies and they took it to the road. My running partner, Tammy, and I have logged a lot of miles together over the last 9 years. Now, when I show up to her house and we greet, we just know whose turn it is to start spilling. Whoever's story is the most weighty gets to go first. Sometimes that person claims the entire run, and sometimes we switch in the middle, extending a listening ear in return. It's an interesting and mutual exchange that I am always better for. And these two travelers, like Tammy and I, they can't help but talk. They need to process, discussing the events, retelling the stories, asking the questions, breathing quick. They each try to get a word in edgewise. It's a heated conversation punctuated with deep sighs of concern. I can envision these two meeting in the middle of the street between each other's houses, a knowing look exchanged. Let's go. We got to get out of here. And after a short bit, they are met on the road by a stranger, someone who had clearly not checked their Twitter feed or the local news. It's Sunday, for goodness sakes. You didn't even watch Meet the Press? Good grief, where have you been? The two travelers quickly fill Jesus in on his own story. They don't waste any time. Have you noticed that there's a thing we do when we go through a traumatic event? Sometimes we shut down and we remain silent, but other times we have to share the story over and over and over again. It's a way to process, to make sense of what happened, to identify and gain perspective. And I'm not sure why we do this, but I know I do it, and I've listened while others have. It is a gift to be given a listening ear in those moments, and it's a gift to be a listening ear, to be entrusted with such stories. When the flood happened here in 2013, our entire community needed to talk about our collective experience. We personally skirted major disaster, but others did not. And despite our relative ease with cleanup efforts, we were still greatly impacted, just as many of you were. Anyone who lived in and around Boulder County that September has a story to tell. And we bonded as a community through that storytelling. These travelers have a story to tell, and Jesus listens to what they know about him. And remember, they don't know that this is Jesus. He is hidden from them. And they say things to them like, he was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. And Jesus listens as they outline their hopes and their dreams and their disappointments. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And he listens some more as they recall the morning's events about his missing body and angels and the tales from the women. I think it's important Jesus hears this from them. And while he must already know their fear and confusion, their grief and their pain, he loves them. And this is what love looks like. Listening like you have all the time in the world. Listening without agenda. Listening to the pain behind the words, offering a tissue and an arm around the shoulder. And it's important that they know he hears them, even though they have no idea it is him. And then the story continues. And what happens next, I'll be honest, throws me a little. Verse 25. He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. Jesus jerks them out of their funk, out of their stupor. He reminds them of the words spoken years before any of these events occurred, before all of the pain and confusion. Jesus had to rattle them to get them to see. And I know this happens to me. I can mull, I can stew, I can whine, I can worry, and I remain stuck. And sometimes I am stuck for an afternoon or for a day. Other times it's for months or seasons. But then something happens. Someone says something, I hear a song, I read a story, I have a thought, and all of a sudden I'm aware again. I'm awakened. And it's not that we're wrong when we're stuck. We're ripe. We're ripe for an awakening. And Cleopas and his companion, they wake up, now ready and on the brink of a major discovery. In verse 28, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" Jesus was gonna keep on going. He wasn't planning to stop with these travelers once they got to Emmaus, but they invited him. They insisted that he remain with them. And you know what it's like to be invited to something. When I invite someone into my home or out for lunch or for a walk, I am opening myself up to them. I'm interested in them. I want to know more about them. An opening is created. And Jesus knows this. He senses their desire. And just as he waited for their invitation, he too waits for ours. He waits for our longing. He waits for us to be open. He waits for us to be ripe for him to appear to us, and he does. Sometimes we can make our relationship with Jesus so very complicated. We mull and process in angst, and we try to be perfect. We demand so much of ourselves, and yet I don't think it's that difficult. The road of faith, it's about moving and walking and talking and eating. It's about roads and tables. Jesus' body was broken for them as bread. And the moment they ate was the moment they awoke. They were ripe, they were ready, and it took being stuck in the pain and confusion for them to awaken, for them to be open, for them to see. And then Jesus disappeared, not out of cruelty, but because he was now present in their bodies. Jesus' presence was all around and in and through. Christ was now in them. The simple is divine. Accepting something as mundane as the gift of bread and doing something as mundane as walking and talking, it ushers in the divine. Accepting the simplest of gifts returns us to sight, delivering us into an awakening. And just as I like to make things complicated, believing if I do this or that, soon my relationship with God can easily slip into something transactional. If I just prayed more or donated more or was nicer to people, it would get better. But that's not necessarily true. It's returning to the simple in the mundane. It's about returning to trust, to rest, and returning to the precious work of loving God, loving my neighbor, as I learn to love myself. This is the work of the road, pressing into angst and confusion. And the retelling of stories is necessary as we run scenarios and ask the what-if questions of our fellow travelers. The work of the road is the work that brings us to the table of digestion, of internalization, of acceptance, and discovery. It is finally in my most perplexing moments that I can lay it down. The walking, the hiking, the running, the lifting, all of it primes my body for the acceptance of what is. And often in the middle, I will collapse into sobs or curses or both. And until I am overwhelmed with the too much of it all, until I realize I am incapable, I am ill-equipped, I am human, that's when the divine enters in. The surrender yields the awakening. The travelers then didn't just stay put in Emmaus, they had work to do. They had a return trip to make. Verse 33, they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. We all have to leave Jerusalem, and we can be in a bad way. But believe it or not, all is conspiring for our good. We move, we walk, we talk, we listen, we vent, and then something breaks loose. But then we get to go back to Jerusalem. Our lives are rich with Emmaus journeys. From the moment my eyes click open in the morning to the time I lay my head on my pillow at night, I can embark on multiple Emmaus journeys, because this is what a life of faith looks like. This is what a life of love looks like. We can enter into the confusion and the questions, the pain and the despair, because we know we won't stay there. There are people, some who are known, some who aren't, who will travel with us. And all the while, whether we see him or not, Jesus is there, around us and in us and through us. He died and resurrected so he could walk with us, because he knows our suffering, and he's not going to leave us there. And while Jerusalem is the place of our suffering, it's the place of our confusion, our uncertainty, our concern, our worry, our self-righteousness, our broken relationships, our insecurity, our lack of confidence, our idleness, our shame, our boredom, we will return, but we won't be the same. The road meets us where we are, and once we enjoy a good meal, our eyes are opened at the same time our bellies are filled. Let's go back. I can't wait to tell the others what has happened to me. We arrive. We know something in our hearts. We know something down into our bones. We know love. And Jesus' appearances don't stop here in Emmaus. He shows up once more, this time to the disciples, and he reminds us again, it is all so very basic as roads and tables, as full bellies and hands and feet. In verse 36, while they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I, myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet, and while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. Jesus is body and blood before his death, and he is body and blood after his resurrection. He is body and blood just like us. Christ is ours. The body of Christ is ours. The resurrected Christ is ours. Our bodies burn with the heartbeat of Christ. We suffer, we love, we embrace, we are wounded. With Christ, we walk the road, we eat the bread, we doubt, we fear, we believe, and then we rise. The divinity of our humanity is because of the resurrected Christ. And in this divinity, we walk the mundane and glorious road, feasting at mundane and glorious tables with each and every mundane and glorious person. The companion of Cleopas went unnamed. Cleopas is me. Cleopas is you. His companion is me. His companion is you. We are on this road together just in time to meet up with our fellow travelers and convey what we now know to be true. He is alive. He is here. He's on the move, and he's hungry.
Friend, I want you to be free. Walk in your path of authenticity. So I make for you the space of me, a place of embrace, of hospitality. We walk side by side, not in front or behind. We can laugh, we can cry, we can simply be as we're walking each other home, walking each other home. Companions on the journey, you and me. We are unfolding, we are living mysteries, walking each other home. All along the rugged road, traversing storms, uncertainty. Even when we disagree, I celebrate your truest becoming. No fair weather friend, with you whatever's round the bend. Gracious love, unconditioned, deeply sets us free. walking each other home.
Thanks again for watching today's sermon at Left Hand Church. If you live in Colorado and would like to attend, we meet on Saturdays at 5 o'clock. If you'd like to contribute to Left Hand Church, go to lefthandchurch.org/give. And if you'd like to send us a confidential prayer request, you can send it to prayer@lefthandchurch.org. Thanks again for watching.